keep going?
I'm not very.
Yes!
Yay!
Yeah, Margaret,
The good news is we still have over an hour of time. The even better news is we could fill it with more lecture today, which means less tomorrow and more activity. But we're not sure what we're doing yet.
let's just see how long it takes to do this.
I think everybody handed out. Does everybody have a handout that looks like this? They're not
Okay, we
everywhere,
handed
but
out
it's
this
on
one,
this. Yes.
These are difficult questions,
I
Adam.
know, they really are. I didn't know the other copies.
All right, so this is sort of Val talked a lot about planning for the individual and an individual animal's needs and some considerations that you may want to think about. So this is more the broader approach of just how we plan. And this is really launching us into the practical part of what we're going to be doing going forward after we chat about safety. But this is how we would work through enrichment. And like problem solving, for those of you who have been through problem solving, it's really about the process. And this is very much the same thing. It's about the process. And this process that we're going to walk you through can be applied to anybody. And so this is really like getting into the meat of what we're going to be doing. So again, I think we've said several times out loud now, it's not what items we can use, but how do we encourage or discourage certain behaviors or activities with the animals. So we're going to walk through a planning chart, sort of, again, like the problem-solving process. We want to follow the planning chart and not jump ahead to, ooh, I could give this. So we want to, stay with that chart. And with the chart, we'll have, we talk a lot about goal-driven enrichment. So we'll have one goal for the chart. So if you have 2 or 3 goals, you would go through the process several times with the chart for each goal. And of course, like I said, Val's going to be talking about safety, so we do want to assess everything for safety, and then also looking at testing, kind of like with the bird example she talked about. We want to make sure that we, review each strategy until it can be accepted. All right, so again, like problem solving, it's best if we can have new, fresh brains, because when you're mired in your daily interactions with an animal and rushing around to get things done, sometimes we all get stuck in a rut. So the more people that you can involve, perhaps the better brainstorming and different ideas and different perspectives. So kind of like problem solving, it's good to have as many different people, because they're going to think about different things than maybe you would. So this is the chart. We're going to walk through each step of this. The first thing that we do is start with research. So what does that mean? Know the animal, know the species. And it's really nice if you create a fact sheet at the end of it, because then you always have that as a resource available to you. Okay, so research the species, all of these sorts of things. So some species may have a variety of, they may have variation to their activity budget that's based on seasons. They may have that in the wild. You may also see that seasonal changes here, in Oakland, perhaps because of the rain, or they can engage in different behaviors at different rates because of the conditions of the exhibit. But just for an example, a brown bear might spend more time engaging in food-related behaviors in the autumn, especially if they're in an extremely cold area where they're going to go into this hibernation phase. They need to engage in more eating behaviors leading up to that. In the summer, they're not going to engage in as much time spent eating. So just keep that in mind too. There may be seasonal variations. In this particular, so this is an aquarium, and this is demonstrating one of those mixed species, different strategies to feeding, different types of feeding, and how we would accommodate everybody's needs within the group. So you want to think about, I've got all these animals in this enclosure, what different strategies do they use? We've got the PVC with the lettuce on it, and there's also, you can't see it, but these little like red bloodworm kind of worms for the carnivorous fish versus the ones who are eating the vegetation. So on the bottom, on the mid-level, floating, and this is the, again, the bundle of greenery and the little worms. And then in this, it's a little bit hard to see, but this is the reflection of the top of the water, so that one's floating on top. So we've got all levels addressed here. So I just learned this. I am, by no stretch of the imagination, a bison expert, and we were talking about this yesterday, and Val said, oh yeah, they do this behavior to establish dominance and to determine who's the winner, if you will, without actually having to engage in physical aggressive interactions. So, and these are wild animals, right? So whoever makes the biggest dust plume, yes, thank you. Whoever makes the biggest dust plume is the baddest guy around. So, pretty important for them to have this kind of substrate. Not heavy dirt, not mud, but something that will plume up. And if they can engage in this behavior, what's it going to do? Yeah, decrease the actual physical combat kind of aggression. So that's something that we really want. And Colleen was telling us about some unfortunate interactions amongst male bison in the past here. And so we kind of had a little discussion about this particular behavior.
And I worried about it all night.
No, I'm serious. I thought about it all night. It really needs to be addressed.
The bison on the high bell is only one, but she creates her own dust bowl out of, but she clears the ground and has a dust bowl. Because we brought her dirt piles and she's like, that's not what I want.
Yeah.
And she has her own, so they do have that available to them because they need it.
Yeah, that's what Tony said.
Yeah.
It serves a lot of other purposes, okay? All the things you read about that, the parasites and the scratchiness and comfort and all
Yeah,
those
she's in
things.
it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do foxes find food? And hearing, right? So they're listening and bouncing. So they need something to, right, get into. All right, so I'm going to come back to the other video, but I just, Val just shared this video with me.
Oh, well, you may have seen
This is stunning video.
So while you're watching, does anybody else know the research that went on with this about 4 or 5 years ago with how their success rate at Phil's? See, it's a Polish guy who did it. I think that's blind. Really fascinating. They could not find.
Get in there.
They couldn't find any correlation between her, what she was hunting, how she was hunting, anything to correlate with her success rate. Because it was like a 50% success rate or something. And they couldn't figure out what made her more successful until one of them said, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's some weird magnetic pole thing going on. And so they started looking at her orientation as she approached and found the animal, and it turned out, I think it was like north-northwest. If she approached going north-northwest, her kill rate went up to in the high 80s%, and without that, it was, 30 or 40%. It's like, there's so much stuff we don't know, It's fascinating.
So obviously in the snow, she's having to go quite deep. And just the depth of the substrate here would be, whoa.
They got a pointy nose for a reason.
Yeah, so anyway, just stunningly beautiful photography there. Okay, we think we already mentioned this, but again, brown hornbill, how are they finding their food and what kind of food are they consuming? They're driving that sharp beak down into the ground and acquiring insects.
And that's a wildwood.
It's one of my favorites. All right, so again, sort of know the animals, know what natural behavior is. Do they have special adaptations? Obviously, something like an anteater is quite a specialized, has very specialized feeding adaptations. So this enrichment device was created to encourage, that tongue going in. And is this the one that the public could also see?
Yeah.
They can see from the other side, so they can see that action.
We're on the public side.
So there's a piece of acrylic, I didn't realize this, there's a piece of acrylic here, and those little pill bottles are attached to the acrylic. So the animal obviously can't come through that. Okay, so we want to research the species, we want to research the individual. And all of this information is in your handout. All right, so once we've done our research, then we can begin to think about what the goals are. Remember, this is goal directed. This isn't, I want to give a toy. Okay, why do you want to give that toy? What do you want to do with it? So we're going to discuss different types of goals. We may have behavioral goals, and on the exercise that if you've already signed up, you will have specific goals that are given to you. So we might want to have behavioral goals, we might have biological goals, but in any case, whatever type of goal you have, you may want to make an animal more visible, have it destroy your enclosure less. Whatever type of goal you're going to create, you want to clearly define it. All right, and our goals are what focus us during the brainstorming phase. So in this case, with the hammer pot feeding, perhaps we want to encourage searching for food in water. So a new way of, or a new substrate, if you will, of obtaining the food. And obviously look at all these behaviors that are going to go on while that animal's digging up the food with his feet.
Again, this is a wild one, looking at the wild behavior can give you a lot of good enrichment.
Okay, maybe we have something like strengthening, an animal's muscles, or getting them more toned or physically fit. So elephants reach up in the wild, oftentimes in captivity, we're not feeding them up high. So perhaps one of our goals is increase neck and back and shoulder muscles. Perhaps we want to improve visibility. Oh, whoops, well that's not good, is it? I showed you this picture yesterday, but see the blue on the snow there? That might draw the animal out to be in a much more visible location to the public. All right, so the reason that selecting and or identifying goals is so important is because we may have different strategies for different goals. We want to use our time wisely, and we want to make sure that our enrichment, we spend a lot of time creating these enrichment devices. We want to make sure that they pay off, for the animal. It should be fun for us, but really the benefit needs to come for the animal. So again, kind of think about the problem-solving exercise and how we might have one situation, one behavior, but depending on why that behavior occurs, we might have different strategies. So very comparable to what we do in this part of the enrichment process. So let's say we have a bear that aggressively, monopolizes the feeders. We want to reduce the aggression as our goal, and maybe we want to encourage certain behaviors, tolerance, and giving everybody else access. So what if our goal, or our biological example is that the bear is overweight? Our goal would be to increase physical fitness, and then how we would do that through these very specific ways. All right, just again, animals destroying your enclosure, how are you going to create strategies to address this problem? And again, all of this is in your handout, so I'm not going to read everything. But here you see we have different strategies based on our goals. That's just why it's really important to identify what your goals are. If I want to reduce aggression, I might have more and more complex feeders, create visual barriers, all those sorts of things that we've talked about. If I want to increase physical fitness, I'm going to do a set of different things. So you want to make sure that your enrichment is paying off in the end. And that's really what this is about. Identify your goals so you know where you're going. And then you get to do the fun part, one of the fun parts, it's all fun with enrichment, is brainstorming. During brainstorming, there are no bad ideas. You say what, and this is what you're going to do in your, as part of your practical part of this workshop, is you're going to brainstorm. So everybody's firing out ideas. There are no bad ideas. There's no judging. Oh, why would you say that? We've tried it before. It never worked. Everything's a good idea in the brainstorming phase. You don't want to cut off the creative process. Okay, so this is about like, let's just write down everything. All right, no judging. And if you need to kind of spark your brain a little bit, there are lots of options for helping you to create ideas. I don't know if y'all visit the SHAPE website, but you can certainly visit the Shape of Enrichment website and have a look. There's a database of enrichment ideas. I realize you in the back can't see this, but again, you have it in your handout. And if you haven't visited the SHAPE website, we would certainly strongly encourage that you do that, because it's a really nice place just to kind of get ideas.
It was. Right now, this part still works, but it's having a lot of problems, so we're actually just starting a whole new one. Got hacked a few years ago, and
You could have told me that before I got
well, I'm
cheerleading.
sorry. No, but this part you can get to now for free, because we're not selling subscriptions till we get things fixed. And so this is all, everything's for free right now. So you can go look at the ideas. But don't, that whole bit about sending an email and registering and paying, you forget all that, for right now.
It's for free.
Get on it quick.
That's right.
Screenshot everything.
All right, so after we get our brainstorming, then we're going to start to sort of look through these possible ideas. And we need to set criteria for how we assess whether or not they're safe or, appropriate ideas, not only for achieving our goal, but for safety and practicality, all of those other things that might make us say, we can't do that, or yeah, I really think we can do this and do it really well. So we want to evaluate each of our devices, each strategy that we come up with. We want to really critically think through whether or not it seems feasible. All right, and then we get to the point in, okay, we've got these that we're gonna try. We're gonna take these to the next level. Then we might have this other set of alternates, and we want to keep those. We don't want to throw them out. Maybe they achieve another goal. Maybe they just need some tweaking, and we want to rework them and rethink them and try to make them safe. Whatever it is, don't just flush them down the toilet. Go ahead and keep them as a possible list of things you might use in the future. You never want to throw away an idea. Always keep it there. But we're gonna end up with our finalists, if you want to call it that. Sorry. So we've got our two lists, and sometimes you can be surprised at what you come up with from the brainstorming. Something that seems like it might be a really weird idea could actually end up being a good idea. Do you remember yesterday I talked about this baboon enrichment that has little wheels on it, so the baboon could kind of run around, and oh, thanks. So we talked about, this came out of this sort of process where we were looking for some idea for these baboons who really needed to displace some undesirable behavior. And they wanted to, chimpanzees come to mind as this too, who need to,
I'm looking for another one. Just keep talking.
a little sticky. Who need to push things around. Chimpanzees might need to push things around in order to display and get that aggression or displaying out of the way that they just are so driven to do. And we sort of joked about, give the baboons a little car to drive around. There's their car. That was what they could do, and kind of drive that around. So even when you say an idea that seems a bit, I didn't have to work for it.
You worked hard enough.
If you have an idea that seems like it might be a little bit kooky, it could still be worth going back and thinking through. Okay, so then we go through the approval process. And this is important. It's important that it's not just me, the keeper, going through the brainstorming, creating the ideas and saying, yep, I think that'll work great. Because there may be things that my experience isn't going to have me ask the right questions and make sure that something's safe. So we want to make sure we have a good approval process. On your approval form, there's some certain things that you want to identify. And we were just talking about this morning, is you want to name your device. And I know, like elephants, there's some good names for the devices up there, but you do want to be able to identify what the device is. This one pictured is called the dolly. It came out of a primate training and enrichment workshop that we did in Bastrop. And so you have to create your device, you have to go through this process, get approval, and name it so that when you're creating your schedule down the road, you say, Monday, whatever the date is, the dolly's good. So you want to be able to know what that device is.
So what is this device do?
What's the dolly? Well, it's actually a puzzle feeder.
Are there springs on it?
No, those
How
are,
does it work?
Not springs in between washing.
Looks like it.
oh, right there, yeah, for attaching. Don't get mired into specifics. Enjoy the dolly.
I'm trying to figure out how it works.
I know about the dog.
It falls out of the cup and then it springs back up. It usually closes it in.
If you want the deets, I'll give them to you later. All right. Just going through other things that are part of your approval process. And, really, it is important that your supervisors, veterinarians can often be cumbersome in the process, but we need to have some way to make sure that there is some measure of veterinary approval, particularly if you're using something that's brand new and hasn't been used before. But I think as this database of approved items and approved materials grows, then there's less, it gets caught up
It's
less.
ZM approval here.
ZM approval. All right, so just, as a sample of how you might submit your request, you've got what I call it is a bamboo feeder, a description, what the goal is, to whom the device will be given and where, and then maybe a picture of it. And then place for signatures and date. Okay. Some process for approval. Then we move into prototyping it. Perhaps you need to think a little bit further on what it's going to look like, but somehow you want to begin developing this and see if it's going to need any modifications. So the prototype may actually end up being the final product, or you may need to tweak it a little bit more. Obviously, we want to check for safety. That's a big part of it. We always say an enriched environment is inherently more dangerous because you're not sitting in a concrete box with nothing to do but go nuts. So of course there is a bit more risk with enrichment, but we want to do everything we can to protect.
More dangerous for your physical being, but safer for your mental being.
Exactly.
And your well-being.
Yes. All right, so Val's going to be talking a lot more about safety and some of the important questions that you want to ask for that. Yeah, then we always have the issue, naturalistic versus artificial. Some institutions, it's much more important. Perhaps going into California, I don't know if there can be bright red boomer balls floating around in the California enclosures because that's the new shiny thing, or if it doesn't matter. But it is something that is really important to some institutions or directors, so we always do want to think about that. What are the benefits and drawbacks of natural versus artificial? Yeah, so I don't think, does anybody have any questions about that? Anything I need to go over?
That is cool.
Big tire ball, can y'all see that?
That's who actually loans it out for a few months at a time to other zoos in the area.
How did they?
Somebody moves it for them. So how to make that in shape?
How to make that in shape? It's available on the website for free.
No, the mag issues are not free.
All right, so we have then we have this sort of crossover of materials that look artificial, but wait. Yeah, you see the options up there, right? All right, then we want to test it, and really important part of testing, don't just test it and kind of casually see what you think. You want to really observe the animal and take some data, some way to really document if it's effective, if it's meeting your goal, certainly if it's safe, all those kinds of things. All right, so do spend a bit of time assessing, particularly when it's a new item. You don't want to just give it and walk away and go have your coffee break. And you want to, there's a number of ways that we can assess enrichment, and we are actually going to spend a good bit of time on data collection, but an enrichment interaction rating, EIR, is a really nice way and a pretty quick and easy way compared to some of the other more formal data collection techniques that will give you a good idea of how the device is being used and if it's meeting your goals.
Tracks is a 1 to 5 rating filter.
What does?
Our data entry system.
Okay, so getting back to not did the animal play with it the way I thought they would, does it meet your goal? That's what we want to start with a goal, and we want to come full circle around to, do these strategies meet our goals or goal? So we want to do one goal for each one, right? So really important, we need a way to check on that. All right, so if the device meets your goal, great, you're going to move on to the next step. If the device does not meet your goal, you're going to loop back through and perhaps revise it. And then you would go back through again. All right, repeat whatever the process is that you need to. All right, we talked about a library already. Frequency of use we've touched on. All right, and I think Val started off by saying this is really important. I hear a lot of people say, oh, we're kind of using the same old stuff over and over. You need to refresh our enrichment a little bit. It's stale. The animals have acclimated to everything. And this gets back to enrichment is never done, right? Enrichment isn't something extra and special. Enrichment is a part of excellent husbandry. So we're never really done with it. And again, that's why it's good to bring in people from different areas, because they're going to help you with that creative process. And get on websites, look at what other people are doing. Don't just automatically mimic what somebody else is doing. Put yourself through this process so that you understand why you're doing something, maybe stealing some of their good ideas. But just because, oh, what kind of enrichment do you provide for your blah, blah, blah? You want to know why. So just remember to keep back in that loop of addressing goals. But you are really never done. And report. Please document what you're doing and find some outlet for reporting it, whether it's publishing papers, whether it's giving presentations, reporting it to SHAPE. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can share this information, and then you can have a really great information exchange. All right, so nothing new that we've said there. Effective plan, rise as needed, share your results. Yay, Sis-Boom Bop. That was pretty fast.
So, like with the categories, you don't have to use the SHAPE plan. We're going to use it in the workshop because that's what we teach, okay? That's what works for us. You don't have to use that plan. There's other plans. Spider is the most noticeable one, but it's a little more awkward, I find, but whatever. It came out of the same meeting this did, literally. We don't really care what plan you use, as long as it has these critical elements to it, that you're responding to a goal that you've set, you're testing and evaluating, and then you're making changes as needed. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know, I get the, I almost called you Gail. Val's saying, as long as you have a process, but I really love this process. I think it's highly usable, user-friendly. It's still achieving all those things that she just mentioned, whereas something like Spider is a little bit more cumbersome. I can't tell you how many zoos I go to and they're like, oh yeah, we use Spider. not seeing it. You know, you can't even remember what the acronym stands for, and people are skipping major parts of it. So, oh, well, no, we don't do that part of it. Well, then you've got like a three-legged spider. So I find this process super helpful and user-friendly and actually doable. You know, still approaches enrichment in a comprehensive, goal-driven way, but is user-friendly. It's not such a burden to do. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, I'll pay you later.
Okay. Jen, thank you. All right. So it's about 10 till 1. We had